in the renal corpuscle, drains all the way down into the medulla, and down into this region here. That's your renal papilla. And then everything pretty much drains into this region, which is your renal pelvis. Alright, and that's going to be taken to your ureter, which is going to take the urine to the bladder. Alright, so once we know, where we're looking, then you can determine what you're looking for in each section. Alright, so in the cortex, you have what's called your cortical labyrinth, and you have your medullary rays. So your cortical labyrinth pretty much is made up of your renal corpuscles. So you can see the renal corpuscles here, these circular structures. And where you find, in the cortical labyrinth, you also find your proximal and distal convoluted tubules. So remember, you have your renal corpuscle, and the fluid is going to drain into your proximal convoluted tubule. It dips down into the loop of Henle, and then it goes back up into your distal convoluted tubule. So if you do a cross section, you're going to be seeing your corpuscles and your proximal and distal tubule all in the same region. Alright, so where you're seeing all these corpuscles, that's your cortical labyrinth. In between the cortical labyrinth, you're going to see these areas that have these tubules, these longer tubules kind of running in the same direction. So those are your medullary rays. That's where you're going to find your thick ascending and descending limbs of the loop of Henle, and you also find your collecting ducts. Alright, so once you see these tubules kind of all sitting together, that's your medullary rays. Alright, and then up here where you have all these corpuscles, that's going to be your cortical labyrinth. Then as we move into the medulla, so notice all our corpuscles are in the cortex. So as you move down to here, so now we're transitioning from the cortex into the medulla. So now all we're seeing are your tubules. Sorry, it's very dull. Alright, so this region, that's going to be your medulla. And you notice that the tubules pretty much are all running in the same direction. And then as we move towards the renal pelvis, the tubules start to combine, so they start to run into each other. You can actually see some of them coming together to form larger and larger tubules. Alright, so that's where you're going to find your papillary ducts. And then this portion here, that's the tip of the pyramid, so that would be your renal papilla here. And then here where the fluid is draining into this region, that's your renal pelvis. Alright, so let's go back up to our cortex. Alright, look at high power. Alright, so that's our renal corpuscle here. So the renal corpuscle is made up of what's called the glomerulus, which is just a network of capillaries. And they're all kind of twisted and folded on each other. So you're not going to see, individual capillaries like we're used to seeing. You're just going to see kind of this bunch of cells sitting there. Alright, so that makes up your glomerulus. This outer membrane, which has a simple squamous epithelium, that's your Bowman's capsule or your glomerular capsule. Alright, so your corpuscle is made up of the capsule along with the glomerulus. So this entire structure is your renal corpuscle. Alright, then you're going to have your proximal and distal tubules sitting right beside the corpuscles. Alright, so this is a proximal tubule here. So notice we have these large cells, and inside the lumen isn't very clear. It has all this stuff inside the lumen. In the proximal tubule, that's where you have your brush border. It's not, all that clear, but you have this kind of schmutzy stuff in the lumen, and so your brush border is not going to be very visible here. All right, but you have these larger cells. You have all this stuff in the lumen. The lumen is it's not very big or not very wide, and the cells pretty much, they're a little bit further apart because they're so large. So you're going to see the nuclei kind of spaced out in the proximal tubules. In your distal tubule, so let's look around and see if we can find a distal tubule. Alright, so in the distal tubule, the lumen is much clearer than you'll see in your proximal. So notice the difference. You have the smoochy stuff in the proximal. In the distal, you have it's much clearer, and the cells are smaller than you see in your proximal tubule. Alright, so the nuclei tend to be a little bit closer together in your distal tubule because the cells are a little bit smaller. Alright, you're not going to see the brush border in the distal tubule, and you're not going to see all that stuff within the lumen. And the lumen tends to be a little bit wider. Alright, so you have a very clear lumen, smaller cells, nuclei a little bit closer together. Whereas with the proximal, larger cells, you have this stuff in the lumen, lumen not as wide, and it's not as clear as you will see in your distal tubules. Alright, now with our macula densa, let's see if we can find another one. Alright, so that's all in our cortical labyrinth. Alright, that you will find your corpuscle, your proximal, and distal connecting tubules. Alright, with the macula densa, in the distal convoluted tubule, you're going to have this group of cells that are within the distal convoluted tubule. And at some point, when the tubule is coming back up, it comes very close to your glomerulus. And the part of the distal convoluted tubule that's closest to the glomerulus, you're going to see, you have this specialized group of cells that make up your macula densa. And in the, so let me see if I can find a good one to show you. Alright, so we have a distal convoluted tubule here. So notice that where the cells that are closer to the glomerulus, the nuclei are kind of bunched together on this side. So those cells make up your macula densa. Alright, so it's always in your distal convoluted tubule, and they're always on the side that's closer to your glomerulus. Alright, so pretty much what those cells do are they sense any changes in your sodium chloride concentration that's going through the tubules, and then what that does is your glomerulus, it secretes substances to these other cells. So what happens is you have changes in your filtration rate within the glomerulus. So those cells are usually they're found in your distal convoluted tubule. Alright, so you're always looking for your distal convoluted tubule on the side that's facing the glomerulus, and you see the cells kind of bunched together. Let's see if I can find another example.